Welcome to the world of sci-fi stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe the channel. Enjoy the listening. Chaos erupts as hostile forces spot a human warship. The calm before the storm, the galaxy stretched out in all directions filled with millions of stars, planets, and mysteries. For most people, it was a place of wonder. For Captain Sarah Dawson and her crew aboard the Odyssey, it was just another day in space. The crew of this human warship had been traveling through deep space on a mission to explore new systems and gather vital resources. The ship was sleek, its metallic hull designed for speed and firepower. But in this moment, it felt like a peaceful island in an endless ocean of stars. The Odyssey had been on its mission for weeks, and the crew was beginning to get comfortable with their routine. The hum of the engines was a familiar sound, the steady rhythm of daily life. Sarah stood in the command deck, watching the stars twinkle. On the giant view screens in front of her, her dark hair was tea-back, and her uniform was neat, reflecting the calm and professionalism that had earned her the rank of captain. Everything seems quiet, she murmured to herself, her voice barely breaking the silence of the room. Her first officer, Lieutenant James Hunter, glanced over at her with a knowing look. It always does before a storm. Sarah smiled slightly, appreciating the lieutenant's dry humor. He had been with her since the beginning, and their bond was unspoken but strong. They had been through countless missions together, and somehow they always seemed to survive. But today felt different. There was an uneasy feeling in the air, a sense that something wasn't quite right. Even though everything on the surface seemed peaceful, the ship's sensors had been silent for hours. No foreign ships, no strange readings, just the hum of the engines and the distant stars. This was exactly the kind of quiet Sarah hated. It was too still, too perfect. She knew that in space silence didn't last long, and when things did go wrong, they went wrong fast. Commander Sarah called out to the head of the engineering department, her voice cutting through the calm atmosphere. Any issues with the engines or weapon systems? A young officer with a sharp mind, tapped at his console and shook his head. Everything's running smoothly, Captain. No problems. Sarah nodded, but something was still gnawing at her. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and right now they were telling her that something was wrong. Her eyes moved across the display in front of her, taking in the data from the surrounding space. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet something about it felt off. Let's do a deep scan of the nearby star systems, Sarah ordered. We haven't detected anything in ours. I want to be sure. Lieutenant Hunter raised an eyebrow, but quickly got to work. Captain, scanning now. The ship's sensors stretched out like invisible hands, probing the nearby systems. The data began flowing onto the screen, but Sarah didn't feel the usual rush of relief. When the scan came back clear, her eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones. As the minutes ticked by, the crew continued their routine tasks, but the tension in the air began to grow. The quiet was beginning to feel heavier, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Sarah stood at the helm, watching the stars drift by. Her thoughts racing. The ship was alone here, isolated in this corner of the galaxy. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she was starting to feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. Then it happened. The ship's sensor alarms blurred suddenly, piercing the silence like a thunderclap. Sarah's heart raced as the flashing red lights illuminated the room. The crew snapped to attention, their training kicking in as they prepared for whatever was coming. Captain, we've detected something, Lieutenant Hunter shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. An unknown vessel approaching fast. What kind of ship? Sarah demanded, her voice steady but her mind already racing. Is it friendly? No, ma'am, it's not any ship we've encountered before, Hunter replied. He paused for a moment, his face growing pale as he studied the readouts. There's more. There's a whole fleet hiding behind a nearby asteroid field. They've been cloaked. Sarah echoed, her heart's skipping a beat. Cloaking technology was rare, especially in this part of the galaxy. Whoever these ships belonged to, they were no rangers to stealth. The realization hit her hard. They weren't alone, and they had just been spotted. Get us out of here. Full power to the engines, Sarah barked, her voice cold and commanding. But even as she gave the order, she knew it was too late. The alien fleet, now fully visible on the sensors, was enormous. The ships were sleek and powerful, built for warfare. The human warship, the Odyssey, was fast and well-armed, but facing an enemy fleet of this size was another matter entirely. The odds were stacked against them, and the crew had no idea what to expect from the mysterious enemy forces. But one thing was clear: they had no choice but to fight. Brace for impact, Sarah yelled, her eyes scanning the view screen as the enemy ships closed in. The crew sprang into action, securing themselves in their stations and preparing for the battle ahead. The Odyssey's weapon systems came online, but Sarah knew they wouldn't be enough against the sheer size of the enemy fleet. As the crew scrambled to prepare for the coming conflict, Sarah's mind raced. Who were these enemies? What did they want with humanity? And why had they chosen this moment, this ship, to reveal themselves? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was: this was no longer a routine mission. The Odyssey was about to enter a battle for its survival, and the fate of humanity itself might be at stake. The calm was over. The storm had arrived. First contact, a deadly game. The alarm still blared as the Odyssey braced for impact. The hum of the engines and the rhythmic pulse of the ship systems were drowned out by the shrill sirens. Sarah stood rigid at the command station, her gaze fixed on the view screen as the alien fleet drew closer. Its cold metallic ships now fully visible. Captain, their weapons are powered up. Lieutenant Hunter's voice cut through the chaos, filled with urgency. His hands flew across the console, trying to prepare the Odyssey for the inevitable confrontation. Shields at maximum firing positions locked. Sarah's mind raced. She had faced danger before, but this was something else entirely. The scale of the alien fleet combined with their ability to cloak, spoke of a technological superiority that far surpassed humanity's capabilities. They weren't just here to communicate or make a peaceful encounter. They were here to fight. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a random attack. Do we have a clear path to escape? Sarah asked, her voice calm but edged with tension. Hunter's face was pale as he scanned the ship's sensor grid. Negative, Captain. They've surrounded us. No way to outrun them. Sarah turned to Commander Tran, the ship's engineer, who was frantically working to stabilize the ship's systems. Can you make any adjustments, anything that might give us an edge? Tran wiped his brow, his hands shaking slightly as he ran diagnostics. We could try rerouting power to the aft shields and engines, but it won't give us enough speed to outrun them, and we'll lose shield strength up front. Do it, Sarah ordered. We need something, anything, to give us a fighting chance. As TR worked, Sarah's mind kept running through the options. She had always been taught to think fast in times of crisis, but this was unlike anything she'd ever faced. The enemy wasn't just a threat. They were a challenge to everything humanity had ever known. Suddenly a voice echoed across the command deck. It was Commander Evans, the ship's communications officer. Captain, I'm picking up a transmission from the alien fleet. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Were they trying to negotiate, or was it a trick? Put it through, she said, trying to hide the mix of suspicion and hope in her voice. A low mechanical voice filled the room. It was unsettling in its calmness, as though the words had been pre-recorded by an emotionless entity. Human vessel, this is your only warning. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and your species will be eradicated. There was a brief pause, and then the message repeated. Sarah's jaw clenched, her pulse quickening. They're not here to talk, she muttered, already knowing it to be true. The enemy's tone was one of cold authority. They didn't care for diplomacy, and their threats were real. Lieutenant Hunter spoke up again. Captain, their ships are locking onto us. If we don't do something, they'll fire. Sarah's eyes darted across the tactical display. There was a new energy in the air, an undeniable feeling of dread, but also a spark of resolve. The Odyssey might be outnumbered, but humanity had something that could never be measured in weapons or technology: a fierce, unyielding will to survive. Prepare to engage, Sarah commanded, her voice steady and commanding. We show them why they should fear humanity. The ship's cannons roared to life as they fired at the alien fleet, the bright beams of energy lighting up the dark expanse of space. The Odyssey bucked under the force of the weapon's discharge, but the alien ships were already retaliating. Plasma bolts tore through the space between them, narrowly missing the human warship. As Sarah expertly navigated the ship through the chaos, her hands gripped the command console tightly, guiding the Odyssey like a dancer on a battlefield. For a moment, the enemy seemed to hesitate. Sarah could almost feel them studying the Odyssey, assessing their next move, but she couldn't afford to give them time to think. They had to take the initiative, launch the fighter drones. She ordered, watching as dozens of small, nimble ships detached from the Odyssey's hull and sped toward the enemy fleet. These drones were the Odyssey's first line of offense, designed to harass and confuse opponents with their speed and agility. And enemy ship locking on to drone number 3. Lieutenant Hunter shouted, his voice tense, as he monitored the engagement. The drones zipped through space, dodging and weaving around the incoming enemy fire. A few were destroyed, their tiny explosions lighting up the dark space, but the remaining drones carried on their mission to distract the alien forces. Their harassing attacks were enough to keep the larger enemy ships from focusing all their firepower on the Odyssey. That the battle was far from over. On the bridge, Sarah's eyes never left the view screen. She could see the alien fleet moving in closer, their ships growing larger as they closed the gap. Every second it passed felt like an eternity. She knew they couldn't hold them off forever. Something had to change. They needed to turn the tide, or else everything they fought for would be lost. Then, without warning, a ship from the enemy fleet broke formation and moved directly toward the Odyssey, its massive shape growing ever larger in the screen. The ship's hull was black as coal, adorned with strange symbols that pulsed with an eerie glow. Captain Evans called, a sense of panic creeping into her voice. That ship is heading straight for us. Brace for impact, Sarah shouted. There was no time to dodge, no time to retreat. They were about to collide with the unknown. As the enemy ship closed in, Sarah realized something. Their survival depended on their ability to think beyond conventional tactics. They needed to outsmart the enemy, and that meant taking a risk, a big one. A plan began to form in her mind, but whether it would work or not, she couldn't be sure. Get ready, everyone, she said, her voice low but filled with determination. This is far from over. As the Odyssey and the alien ship moved closer, the tension reached a breaking point. The calm had shattered, and the storm was about to hit in full force. The unseen advantage. The ship's hull rattled as a new wave of alien fire rocked the Odyssey. Sparks flew from the console in front of Sarah, her face hardening with resolve. She could feel the pulse of the battle, the adrenaline surging through her body as every nerve in her mind focused on the task at hand. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight to prove that humanity, no matter the odds, would not bow down. Captain, shields are holding for now, but we can't take much more of this. Hunter's voice crackled through the comms, were releasing his words. The enemy was relentless, each barrage of fire pushing the Odyssey closer to the edge of destruction. Sarah's fingers danced across the console, calculating their options. There was no room for hesitation now. The Odyssey was outmatched and firepower, but it wasn't the firepower that would win this fight. It was strategy. Commander Tran, are the engines ready? She asked, her tone calm but commanding. Tran didn't hesitate. Engines are at full capacity, Captain. We can push the thrusters harder if necessary. Do it, Sarah ordered, her voice sharp with authority. She could feel the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. But there was no turning back now. Prepare for a sharp maneuver, Captain. There's an enemy warship closing in at 4 o'clock. They locked onto our position, Lieutenant Hunter shouted from his station. Sarah gripped the edge of the console, her pulse steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. There was no escape. The Odyssey was outnumbered, and if she didn't act quickly, they would be overwhelmed. But she saw something. The alien ships were operating with confidence, but no plan was ever flawless. They had a weakness, one that Sarah had learned to exploit in her time as a commander. A deadly smile played at the edges of Sarah's lips as she issued her command: initiate evasive action, activate the stealth field. There was a brief moment of silence on the bridge as everyone took in her words. The Odyssey had been equipped with a highly experimental stealth technology, a cloaking system that could make them invisible to enemy sensors for a short period. The technology had never been fully tested in battle, and there were risks involved, but Sarah knew it was their only chance. Stealth field Activated, Evans reported, her fingers flying over the controls as soon as the cloaking system powered up. The ship's readings flickered, and the Odyssey vanished from the sensors of the alien fleet. To any observer, it was as though the ship had simply ceased to exist. Hunter looked up, a look of disbelief crossing his face. It worked. They can't see us. The Odyssey had become a ghost, hidden in plain sight. The enemy ships were still firing, but they were shooting at nothing, their beams scattering through empty space. The strategy was risky, but it worked, at least for now. Now's our chance, Sarah muttered under her breath, her fingers gripping the control panel. She could feel the ship humming beneath her feet, the engines working overtime to keep them hidden. Time was on their side, but only for a limited window. Hunter, Sarah barked, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Target their command ship. It's their most vulnerable spot. Hunter nodded, his eyes focused as he locked onto the enemy flagship. The alien ship was larger than the rest, and its sleek, menacing design suggested it was the nerve center of the fleet. If they could take it down, the rest of the enemy force would be thrown into disarray. With a sharp command from Sarah, Hunter unleashed the Odyssey's powerful disruptor missiles. The projectiles shot out with deadly precision, tearing through the empty space toward the alien flagship. They flew silently through the void, their paths hidden by the stealth field that cloaked the human ship. But then, an unexpected twist. One of the alien ships managed to detect the Odyssey's position, its sensors piercing the stealth field. Even if only momentarily, a blast of plasma fire erupted in their direction, striking the Odyssey shields and causing the entire ship to shudder violently. Sparks flew from the communications panel as Evans cursed under her breath, fighting to keep the ship on course. "They're onto us," Hunter shouted. "We need to move now." But Sarah was already 5 steps ahead. She had anticipated this. Even with the stealth field, the Odyssey couldn't remain invisible forever. It was only a matter of time before the enemy adjusted and figured out their tactics. "Tran, prepare the engines for a full throttle burst. We need to break their line of sight," Sarah ordered, her eyes scanning the battlefield as she plotted their next move. Tran's fingers danced over the controls, and within seconds the Odyssey's engines roared to life, propelling them forward at breakneck speed. The ship lurched forward, its thrusters glowing brighter than ever as it tore through space, evading enemy fire. For a split second, Sarah thought they had lost them, until she saw it, a pulse of light cutting through the darkness. It was an energy signature from the enemy flagship, a devastatingly powerful weapon charging up. "We need to move faster," Evans screamed, her hands pulling levers with frantic speed. The pulse shot out from the alien ship, a beam of pure energy that carved through space like a blade. The Odyssey barely dodged it, the beam grazing the hull as the ship veered sharply to the left. "Faster, Tran, get us behind that asteroid field," Sarah shouted, her heart pounding in her chest. Without hesitation, Tran adjusted the thrusters, guiding the Odyssey toward a nearby asteroid belt. The ship hurtled toward it, the rocks a perfect shield from the enemy's deadly weapon. The alien forces would have to take extra time to readjust their aim, giving Sarah and her crew a moment of breathing room. "Hold on," Sarah barked as the ship dove into the asteroid field, the asteroids whizzing past at terrifying speed. For the first time in what felt like hours, Sarah allowed herself a breath. They were in a position of relative safety for now. But the battle was far from over. The alien fleet was relentless, and their new stealth advantage wouldn't last long. But Sarah knew one thing: humanity always fought back, and if there was one thing she could rely on, it was her crew. They had made it this far together. They would take on whatever came next. With the asteroid field providing temporary cover, Sarah turned her focus to the next step. In their fight, the real battle was about to begin. The first strike, the Odyssey veered sharply through the asteroid field, its hull creaking as it scraped past several massive rocks. Inside the ship there was a brief, eerie silence, safe for the hum of the engines and the soft peeps of various consoles. Sarah stood at the center of the bridge, her mind racing, thinking ahead to the next move. Every decision she made now would be critical. "Captain, the enemy is still searching for us," Hunter reported, his voice strained but controlled. "Their search pattern are becoming more erratic, but they're closing in on our last known position." Sarah's eyes darted to the tactical display. The alien ships were still out there circling, searching. They were relentless, But there was one thing. Sarah knew for certain the aliens underestimated humanity's ingenuity. She had to turn that underestimation into an advantage, activate the long-range disruptor cannons. Sarah ordered, her voice firm. We need to hit them hard before they can fully close in. Evans, her trusted weapons officer, responded quickly. Long-range cannons ready, Captain. A low rumble echoed through the ship as the massive disruptor cannons powered up. Sarah had faith in the ship's systems, but she also knew the risks. Firing the disruptors at long range would reveal their position once again. It was a gamble, but they didn't have time to waste. The alien fleet was already regrouping. If they didn't strike first, they'd be overrun. Hunter, Sarah said, her tone unwavering. Lock onto the largest enemy vessel. We can't waste time on smaller ships. We need to their command structure. Hunter worked fast, his fingers flying over the controls. The alien fleet's largest vessel, an imposing warship bristling with weapons, loomed in the distance, its sleek dark hull gleaming under the cold light of distant stars. Was heavily armored, but Sarah knew its size meant it could be vulnerable in certain spots. Vulnerability she planned to exploit. Locking on target, Hunter said. Disruptor missiles primed. Fire, Sarah commanded, watching intently as the Odyssey's cannons discharged the massive energy blast shot through the asteroid field, cutting through the void like a streak of lightning. The attack was precise, the beam of energy hitting the alien warship squarely in its exposed flank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy warship erupted in a violent burst of sparks and debris. The Odyssey shot had found its mark. The warship staggered, its shields flickering erratically. The sheer force of the disruptor blast tore through its outer defenses, weakening it considerably. Direct hit, even, shouted, her face lighting up with a momentary sense of triumph. The shields are down, the enemy's weapons are offline. Sarah allowed herself a brief triumphant smile. That was the first step. The aliens had felt the sting of human technology, and it was only the beginning. But as the enemy ship staggered, regrouping and trying to regain its balance, Sarah knew that she couldn't let up. The aliens would not let such an attack go unanswered. Get us out of here, Tran, she shouted, her voice tight with urgency. They'll send reinforcements, and we need to stay mobile. The Odyssey shot forward once more, weaving through the asteroid field, narrowly dodging debris as alien blasts began to light up the dark expanse behind them. The enemy warship that had taken the brunt of the attack was now scrambling to recover, and its fleet was closing in. But Saw wasn't done. This was only the first strike. They needed more. Hunter, keep an eye on their movements, she said. Any sign of reinforcements, we hit them first. Copy that, Captain. Hunter replied, his fingers moving quickly as he tracked the movements of the alien fleet. It didn't take long before Sarah spotted a shift in the enemy strategy. The warship they'd hit earlier was now sending out distress signals, and reinforcements were on their way. She could see the enemy ships converging on their position, getting ready to launch a full-scale counterattack. Sarah's stomach tightened with tension. This was going to be a battle for the ages, and they needed to make every move count. We don't have much time, Sarah muttered to herself, watching the screen as the enemy fleet converged. Captain, we got more ships incoming from the left flank, Hunter reported, his voice tense. They're trying to corner us. Sarah's mind raced. She thought about their position, backed into an asteroid field surrounded by enemies, and running low on time. There was only one option left. She had to play the Odyssey's greatest card. Evans, I need you to activate the secondary stealth field, Sarah ordered, her voice calm but deadly serious. We're going dark again. Evans nodded, her fingers a blur on the console. I, Captain, initiating now. With the flick of a switch, the Odyssey once again cloaked itself from the enemy sensors. The alien ships, still attempting to track their movements, found themselves shooting at nothing but empty space. For a moment, the humans were ghosts in the void, invisible to their enemies. Now we take the fight to them, Sarah said, her eyes locking onto the tactical screen. The Odyssey shot forward, and this time the captain had a plan. The moment they had made themselves invisible, they had also gained an edge. Now it was time to use it without hesitation. Sarah called the order, engage evasive maneuvers. Hunter, keep those enemy ships occupied. We're going for their weak points. Hunter gave a quick nod, his eyes Focused on the enemy ships closing in, he was ready. The Odyssey would be ready for whatever the aliens threw at them. Next, as the Odyssey dove back into the heart of the chaos, Sarah knew that this battle was far from over, but with each passing moment, she felt something shift in the air. The aliens no longer had the upper hand. The human warship was no longer the prey, it was the hunter, and the hunt was just beginning. The tide turns the stars outside the Odysseys. Gridge seemed to shimmer as the ship glided silently through the asteroid field. The artificial cloak continued to shield them from the enemy sensors, but the tension in the air was palpable. Every crew member on board knew the next few minutes would determine the outcome of their struggles. Sarah stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the tactical routes. The enemy fleet was still searching for them, scattered across the starry void. But Sarah had a plan. She didn't need to rely on the cloak forever. She needed to create a diversion that would draw the enemy's attention long enough for them to strike. Hunter, Sarah called, her voice steady but urgent. I need you to plant false sensor signals on their grid. Create the illusion of multiple ships. Hunter's fingers danced over the control panel as he worked. Planted, Captain. They'll think we're more than one ship scattering their forces. Sarah nodded, satisfied with the progress. The enemy was still too confident in their overwhelming numbers. They believed the Odyssey was just a lone ship, a target they could easily overwhelm. They didn't understand the sheer ingenuity of humanity. Sarah was determined to make them learn. Evans, deploy the decoys, she ordered, turning to her weapons officer. Ready, Captain. Evans replied, her fingers already moving to activate the small remote-controlled drones hidden aboard the ship. The decoys would emit false energy signatures, tricking the enemy into thinking there were several human warships instead of just one. The tactic had been used before in human naval warfare, and it had worked well against overconfident enemies. The decoys scattered into the asteroid field, sending multiple fake signals to the alien fleet. It was only a matter of time before the enemy reacted. Sarah's heart raced as she waited. The moment the enemy ships divided, they would strike. But she had no time to waste. She had to keep the momentum going. Activate the disruptor cannons, Sarah ordered, her tone sharp. This is our moment. We hit them while they're confused. The sound of the ship's weapons powering up filled the bridge as the Odyssey's primary disruptor cannons came online. These were their most powerful weapons, capable of disabling an entire fleet with a single shot if used correctly. With the enemy divided and distracted, Sarah knew this was the perfect time to strike. But one wrong move, and it would all fall apart. Locking on the largest enemy vessel, Hunter reported, his voice calm but urgent. They're splitting up, but I've got a clear shot. Fire, Sarah commanded without hesitation. The Odyssey unleashed a blast of raw energy that cut through the darkness, streaking toward the largest alien ship. The alien warship, an imposing machine of destruction, tried to turn but was too slow. The disruptor blast slammed into its side, disabling its engines and sending it into a helpless spin. Direct hit, even, shouted, a grin spreading across her face. We've taken out their flagship. The alien fleet began to scatter, their once coordinated formation now in disarray. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The enemy would regroup quickly, and they couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. Hunter, monitor their movements, Sarah ordered, her mind already racing ahead to the next move. We need to stay one step ahead. Understood, Captain. Hunter said, his eyes glued to the monitor. They're trying to retaliate. Smaller ships moving into position for a counterstrike. Sarah's instincts told her it was time to vanish once again. The Odyssey was still cloaked, but the enemy was beginning to adapt. If they were going to stay alive, they would have to remain unpredictable. Training gag. Cloaking again. Get us out of here, Sarah ordered. We can't afford to be in the open for long. With a quiet hum, the Odyssey became a shadow in the asteroid field, unseen by the alien ships now circling in confusion. The enemy ships drifted apart, trying to track down the source of the devastating blow, but they were too late. Sarah exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair for a brief moment of respite. The tide was turning, but she knew it was far from over. The aliens were relentless, and they would soon adapt. She had to think even further ahead. We can't let them regroup, Sarah muttered to herself, more determined than ever. We'll hit them where it hurts. Captain Hunter spoke up again, his voice Tinged with caution, the enemy fleet is repositioning. They're moving towards our last known location. But they seem hesitant. Sarah's mind clicked into action. The aliens were nervous. The unexpected attack had thrown them off balance. But that wouldn't last long. They were smart, perhaps too smart for their own good. Evans prepared the secondary disruptor systems. Sarah said, "We'll give them a taste of their own medicine. It's time to finish this." The Odyssey drifted into the shadows, once more silent and invisible. But Sarah's plan was already taking shape. They would deliver a final crippling blow. The enemy didn't know it yet, but they were in for a surprise. As Sarah looked out at the stars through the viewport, she felt a fierce sense of pride. Humanity had fought back against an enemy far stronger and more advanced. The Odyssey had become their symbol, a testament to what humans could accomplish when they faced impossible odds. And as the battle raged on, Sarah knew they would not give up. The enemy would learn to fear the name Odyssey, and they would learn that humans were not so easily conquered. The stage was set for the final act, and Sarah had every intention of winning it. The enemy had underestimated them. Now they would pay the price. The last stand. The stars outside the Odyssey's windows seemed like pinpricks of light, cold and distant, yet inside the ship there was a growing sense of urgency. Sarah and her crew had come far, but the battle was far from over. The alien fleet, now fractured and wounded, was beginning to regroup. The arrogance that had once defined them was beginning to shift into something darker, something more dangerous. They had realized they were dealing with a force far more capable than they had imagined. Sarah paced the bridge, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The ship systems hummed quietly around her, but there was a constant buzzing in her mind, an awareness of the final challenge ahead. She could feel it. The final confrontation was coming. The enemy, though disoriented, was not backing down. They had realized the humans were more than just an annoyance. The Odyssey had become a symbol of defiance, and now they wanted to crush it. "We've got a problem." Hunter's voice broke through her thoughts, cool and precise. "They're converging. We've got at least 5 enemy ships heading directly toward us, and they're bringing the full force of their firepower. They're not playing around anymore." Evans looked at the tactical screen and grimaced. They've realized we're not just some weakling ship. They're coming for the kill. The ship's sensors flickered, briefly confirming the report. The alien fleet, now reorganized and bolstered by reinforcements, was preparing to unbleach everything they had. Sarah could hear the pounding of her own heartbeat as the realization hit her. This was the final stand. Captain TR spoke up, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "We got just one shot at this. If we don't take them out now, we'll be outgunned and outnumbered." Sarah turned to face her crew, their eyes focused on her, waiting for her command. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, but there was no room for hesitation. She had led them this far, and she would not back down now. "Hunter," Sarah said, her voice sharp with resolve, "do everything you can to keep them from locking onto us. I want that cloaking device running at full power. They can't know where we are until it's too late." Hunter nodded, his fingers flying across the console as he worked. Captain Cloak said, 80%. I can keep them guessing, but it won't last forever." Evans, Sarah turned to her weapons officer, "Get the secondary disruptors ready. I want those ships disabled. No more dodging on it, Captain." Evans replied, her fingers already moving to the controls, adjusting the power levels for the ship's remaining weapons. The Odyssey began to move again, slowly slipping through the asteroid field, using the same tactics they had used before. They couldn't afford to be predictable. Now the enemy was adapting fast. The human crew knew they had to strike the enemy before they could strike back. There was no turning back. Sarah glanced at the view screen where the 5 enemy warships were now closing in. The dark shapes of the alien ships loomed ominously, their weapons charging with deadly precision. But this time Sarah wasn't afraid. She was determined. "They're almost in range," TR said, his voice tight with anticipation. "We won't get another chance like this." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She thought about Earth, about everything they were fighting to protect. The enemy thought they could break humanity's spirit, but they had no idea what they were up against. Humans didn't surrender. Humans didn't fall. They fought, and they fought hard. "Evans," Sarah called, her voice Unwavering fire on the closest enemy ship. Take out their engines. We need them disabled now. Evans hesitated for only a moment before pressing the firing sequence. The Odyssey unleashed a powerful blast from its Rupert cannons, aimed directly at the enemy ship's engine core. The beam sliced through the darkness like a knife hitting the alien warship with devastating accuracy. The ship shuddered, its engines flickering, and the once imposing vessel was now a drifting hulk. Direct hit, Evans exclaimed. One down, but the remaining 4 ships were still closing in. The enemy was relentless. They wouldn't be deterred by a single loss. The other ships continued their approach. Weapons charging. Hunter, keep the cloak active, Sarah commanded. We need to be ghosts. Strike, vanish, strike again. Hunter's fingers danced over the console as he maintained the ship's cloaking, the faint hum of the system working at maximum capacity. But Sarah knew it couldn't last. Forever. Time was running out. We're almost there, TR said, his voice rising in with the intensity of the moment. The enemy ships are getting closer. Sarah's mind raced. She was calculating, thinking 5 moves ahead, trying to anticipate the enemy's every decision. They were nearly within range of the secondary disruptors, but she needed something else, something more than just firepower. Prepare the EMP, Sarah ordered, a sudden clarity washing over her. We're going to hit them where it hurts, blind them, disable their systems. We need to take the advantage before they can strike back. Evans's eyes widened in understanding. Ready, Captain. Sarah held her breath as the remaining 4 ships closed in. This was at the moment of truth. Fire, she shouted, her voice carrying across the bridge. The EMP burst from the Odyssey, a pulse of energy that sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. The blast hit them like a thunderclap, temporarily frying their systems and throwing them into chaos. The once coordinated alien ships were suddenly crippled, their weapons malfunctioning and their shields flickering. For a moment, everything went silent. Now, Sarah ordered. The Odyssey emerged from the shadows, launching another devastating round of disruptor fire. One ship exploded into a fiery mass of debris. Another was disabled, drifting aimlessly in space. The remaining 2 ships turned, trying to flee, but it was too late. The Odyssey was already on them. The alien fleet, once so confident in its power, was now shattered. Its ships either destroyed or disabled. The Odyssey, though battered and scarred, had won against all odds. Humanity had triumphed. Sarah stood in the center of the bridge, her chest heaving as the tension began to ebb. They had done it. The enemy had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. The universe had just learned that humanity was not to be trifled with. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. A new dawn, as the dust of battle settled. The Odyssey drifted among the debris of the fallen alien fleet, its once glowing hull now darkened and scarred. The crew, though exhausted, couldn't help but feel a deep sense of triumph. They had done the impossible possible. They had faced overwhelming odds and had not only survived, but had decisively defeated an enemy force much larger and more advanced. But for Captain Sarah and her crew, the fight was far from over. We've won, but at what cost? Sarah murmured, her voice low as she gazed out the bridge window at the wreckage of the alien ships scattered in the void. The quiet hum of the Odyssey systems was a small comfort, but it did little to quell the worry that no her this victory was significant. But it was only one battle in a war that seemed endless. Captain, the enemy fleet is in retreat, Hunter reported, his voice breaking through the silence. Their remaining ships are scattering, trying to regroup. They've underestimated us before, but now they know what we're capable of. They'll be back. They'll come for us again. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving the view of space. I know, and next time we need to be ready. She turned to face her crew, all of them mourn, but resolute. But today we shown them something. We shown them that humanity doesn't back down. We don't run from a fight, and we certainly don't. Blue Evans, the weapons officer, had a tired smile on her face. They were arrogant, thinking they could wipe us out like we were some primitive species. But the Odyssey, we gave them a taste of what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. Let's not get too cocky, TR said, his voice as steady as ever. They'll regroup, and when they do, we need to be prepared. We can't afford to drop our guard. We need to keep fighting, keep pushing. Sarah gave him a sharp look And we will, but for now let's take a moment, we've earned it. She gestured toward the tactical screen. Hunter set a course for the nearest outpost. We'll need to resupply, and I want to check in with the higher-ups. They'll want to know what happened here. Captain Court. Hunter replied, his hands already moving over the console. Sarah turned back to face the stars. The battle was over, but the galaxy was far from safe. They had earned their victory. But she knew the war was far from won. The aliens would come again, and humanity would have to face them head. In the silence on the bridge stretched for a moment as the crew took a collective breath, allowing themselves to savor the moment. But it didn't last long. There was too much at stake. We should start getting ready for the next phase, Sarah said, her tone firm and resolute. We've only just begun. As the Odyssey began its slow journey toward the nearest space station, Sarah looked out into the vastness of space. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. The alien fleets would think twice before underestimating Earth again, and Sarah, along with her crew, would be ready for whatever came next. The war was not over, but humanity had just earned its place in the stars, and no one would ever forget that.